Chest up, shoulders back. Welcome to Revival Fitness, everybody, your home for gains and brains. And be sure to get your program, guys, at revivalfitness.org/programs. Gonna be linked down below. Intermediate and advanced routines to start making real gains and shock your past self. In today's video, we're going to talk about one of the favorite exercises of gym bros, and really gym girls now everywhere, the lateral raise. But in spite of how popular this exercise is, it is still performed incorrectly on a mass scale. This is the definitive guide. This is the last video you're going to ever need to watch about how to perform this exercise. So if you are looking for juicy, succulent, bulbous, 3D delts, if you want to look like Kanye without having to buy women's shoulder pads to put underneath your shirt, let's get into this. So right off the bat here, I want to address a pet peeve of mine when it comes to this exercise. Not even regarding the form, just simply how people say and write it. You ever see somebody say side lateral raises? That is so redundant that somebody with a stutter is offended.
Today, Junior?
It's like how every fitness personality now, even the ones that aren't formally educated, say hypertrophy when they're talking about building muscle when they could simply just say size and save themselves the syllables. Like, you guys waste words like bodybuilders waste egg yolks. But now let's dive into what the lateral raise, what the exercise is, or what it's supposed to be. It is the best method we have to try and isolate the side head of the delt. And I say try because it is not possible to totally 100% exclusively isolate a muscle. Even if you're doing a so-called isolation exercise, the body works as a unit, and even if you're doing something that is meant to just hone in on one particular part of the body, you're not going to only be using that. And that ties into one of the biggest complaints when it comes to the lateral raise. Guys who say that they feel their traps too much, or that they even feel only their traps and nothing in the delts. I see TikToks now of 18-year-olds who claim that they stopped feeling their traps on the lateral raise because they started using a bench for it. Another great example of the optimal bros dragging benches into obscure areas of the gym, taking up space and wasting their own time to hit 0.02% extra muscle fiber in the sagittal plane. But there are two big points here regarding the trap involvement on the lateral raise. First, if your baseline form is good, you are going to hit the side delts as much as possible. They are a primary mover in this exercise. There's no way that that would not be the case. So you don't need any other equipment besides a dumbbell or a cable handle or the machine. If you feel your traps more than your side delts on the lateral raise, then your form sucks. It's simple as that. And the second point here, why are you opposed to feeling your traps? The traps are always going to be used in some capacity whenever you lift your arms up at all. That's just simply one of the functions that they serve. So if you remove them entirely, you wouldn't be able to even do a lateral raise in the first place. Are your traps that menacingly big that you're that concerned about their involvement on lateral raises? It's funny too because I get a lot of questions asking, what do I do to isolate traps? What is the best type of shrug to do for the traps? These guys want bigger traps, but then when it comes to lateral raises, they're rearranging the entire gym to try to minimize the trap involvement. So now let's go into the wrong ways, the most common mistakes people make when they do this exercise. The biggest thing is going to be the pinkies up and the palms facing backward. Now, the common adage, especially among old-timey bodybuilding circles, they will commonly say to turn your pinkies up as if you are pouring a pitcher of water. The reasoning behind this is that you are going to feel the burn more so in your side delts by turning the pinkies up. I've talked about this before, guys, but that so-called burn you feel whenever you turn your pinkies up, that's actually just internal rotation of the shoulders, and your shoulder joints are basically just grinding against each other. That's what you're really feeling. There is no tangible benefit to be gained by turning your pinkies up. The only thing you're going to do is place unwanted stress on the shoulders. Now, you could probably do this for a long time, given how light of an exercise lateral raises are comparatively to most other exercises that you're doing, but there's nothing to be gained from doing this, And once again, we go into the whole Arnold paradigm. Oh, but I saw some IFBB pro do it, bro, and he's way bigger than you, bro. I'm sure he is, man. But that doesn't change the fact that there's nothing to be gained from doing it. And the Pinkies Up method is commonly used by people who make the next mistake with this exercise. They turn it into a shrug. And these are the same people who will say that they feel their traps too much or only feel their traps on the lateral raise. Then you look at their form, and it's no surprise why. So what you'll commonly see is, instead of raising their arms up and down, kind of in a smooth motion, they will initiate the movement from the upper back. They will basically squeeze their shoulder blades together as they are lifting the dumbbells. Hence, you're going to feel the traps much more than you need to. They basically turn this exercise into a weird hybrid of a lateral raise, an upright row, and a shrug all at the same time. You guys know that I am a proponent of lifting heavy, focusing on strength, and prioritizing the compound lifts. But when it comes to something like a lateral raise, this is one of the few exercises in which your progress is not something you need to pound your head against the wall worrying about. If you get up to the point, guys, where you can lateral raise 25 to 30 pounds, you're going to be in that range for a long time. Unless you want to start doing cheat lateral raises and, jumping up and down at the hips and that type of thing. If you want to keep your form pretty strict, you're not going to be exhausting the dumbbell rack on this exercise. Some of you guys are rank novices in the gym, you've been in there for 6 months, and you're concerned that you're only using 15 to 20 pounds. That is normal. If you guys want a full video on all of the signs and symptoms that you are ego lifting, click the video up in the top right. And the final mistake on this exercise is leaning over too much. So the more you lean forward, the more this turns into a rear delt fly than a lateral raise. You'll commonly see people say they're doing a lateral raise. You watch their form, they are hinged over at the hip. You can tell just from the biomechanics that they're hitting their rear delts more so. And there's nothing wrong with hitting the rear delts, guys. You should be doing those too if you want to get the full 3D cap delt look. But in terms of isolating the side delt, bending over is not what you want to do. Keeping a vertical torso is the best way that you're going to isolate the side delts, whether you're doing this exercise standing or seated. So now that we've covered all of the mistakes, let's look at how to do this the right way and break down all of the cues in real time. So, stand up tall, or a very, very slight forward lean, if anything. I like to stand up as tall as I can myself when doing this exercise. Keep your chest lifted. Your pinkies and thumbs are going to stay horizontal. So your palms are going to stay facing down toward the ground. Unlike how a lot of people do these too, you're going to have a slight bend in the elbow, sort of a natural bend that your body's going to assume, but you're not going to consciously really bend at the elbow. Your arms are going to be either directly at the sides, or you can bring them a little bit in front of you as you come down on the eccentric. It's essentially a snow angel without the tops of the hands in the snow, so to speak. You're going to keep your palms facing the ground, like I said. And another cue you can imagine too is basically 2 drawstrings on your wrists. Those are going to pull your arms up and down as you perform this exercise. I think that's the reason a lot of people feel this in their traps and use their traps too much. They think they're initiating with the shoulder, but even then, when they start to kind of lift the shoulders up, they also involve too much of the traps. So really, you can imagine that this movement is starting from the wrist. So now that we know how to properly do this exercise, the next portion is talking about how often you really need to be doing it. A trend I noticed that has gotten more popular lately is spamming lateral raises. I see in comment sections all the time, guys will say, oh man, I started spamming lateral raises and my delts blew up. You'll notice though, there's not really any proof that comes with that, and you can't expect that type of thing from a comment section. But this is very similar to the trend years ago of whenever above-the-knee rack pulls were very popular. Guys would comment, oh man, I started doing above-the-knee rack pulls and they blew up. It's always blew up. I blew up my traps. You actually check out the evidence, though, if you ever actually see these guys post their physiques, which they usually won't. But if they do, most cases you're going to see, okay, it's not the results that you were claiming, right? The whole blew up thing is very, very exaggerated. And in a lot of cases, too, these guys are novices, so they're going to grow from everything else they're doing as well. It's not like you can simply pinpoint the growth there to one single exercise. Now, when it comes to this exercise, too, given that it's very low on the fatigue side of things, you are going to be able to do them more frequently than the bigger exercises that you normally would, such as an overhead press, for example. That said, though, guys, I do not encourage you to hit lateral raises every single day or anything like that. I really don't believe it's necessary to optimize your growth. You have to remember too, you need to give your body some time to recover. What I do myself is hit lateral raises 2, maybe 3 times a week, depending on the variation of my plan that I'm doing. I've never really hindered my progress by doing so, assuming that the volume is sufficient and the intensity is sufficient. So keep in mind this as well when it comes to isolation exercises, especially with light dumbbells and cables. These are great exercises to really take all the way to failure. You can even use techniques for these like drop sets or partials after you have failed through the full range of motion, because the fatigue impact is so minimal. In terms of sets per week, I usually will do anywhere from 6 up to 9, which may surprise people. They might think, oh my god, you don't do like 16 to 20 sets for side delts a week? Not directly, I don't. Keep in mind though, guys, other exercises you do are going to hit the side delts. Rows are going to hit your side delts, as unlikely as you think that might be. Bench press, overhead press are also going to work your side delts. Cable face pulls, inverted rows, upright rows, things like that. Any exercise where the shoulders are involved considerably, the side delts are going to be hit. So for the full 3D delt look, make sure that you are including your rear delts too. Those are the most neglected ones. Check out the video in the top corner, everything I do encompassingly for full delt development. But that's what you really need when it comes to lateral raises, guys. It's not spamming them, it's not doing all these special techniques. You don't have to lie on a bench, you don't need to lie sideways on a bench, you don't need to tie an ankle strap around your wrist and start doing these. I'm not saying those are bad methods necessarily, but at the end of the day, the lateral raise is the lateral raise. It's a very, very, very simple movement pattern once you actually understand the form. You don't need all these bells and whistles and dragging benches across the gym to hit your side delts as much as you can. And I think that's everything. One last note before we wrap up though. Some of you may be asking, well, how do I get delts that look like my favorite bodybuilders? Whenever he does his poses, his delts are like at a flat line across the top and they take up so much space and they're just 3D from every single angle. The answer to that question is by injecting a bunch of oil into them. So unless you want to do that for years and years and years, and perhaps even use synthol in some cases, just accept where you're at. But this has been it for me, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check the link down below, get your program today, start making real gains. Thank you, as always, to the Patreon supporters and the channel members for your continued support, and be sure to get in contact with me down below with any questions you may have about your own training and eating. And I will catch you guys next time.